Hi, my name is Chelsea Campbell and I'm a part of Indiana University's Cognitive Science program. My goal today is to change the way you think about teaching and learning by introducing a simple idea, partial copying. Most of us are often engaging in collective problem solving or social learning. We collaborate with other researchers, we're put on projects with coworkers, or we work in groups in our classes. Most research on social learning has focused on three main questions: who, what, and when. When we ask who we should collaborate with, this refers to the collaboration network. How are we connected to others in the classroom? On the two extremes, you have locally connected groups, in which individuals can only collaborate with their immediate neighbors, or globally connected groups, in which you can collaborate with anyone. What refers to what solution you should copy. Two common biases that have been observed in humans are to copy the most popular solution of your peers, or to copy the best performing solution of your peers. When refers to when you should engage in different types of learning, and this is usually framed as an explore-exploit problem. It is better to explore ideas early, either by yourself or with a partner, before getting into groups and hearing others' ideas. When asking questions of the class, one of my professors would set a timer for 1 minute where we were only allowed to write out our own ideas to answer the question. And then we had 1 more minute to discuss with our neighbor a couple of the ideas that we wrote down before having 1 final minute to decide on one answer with the others at our table. We would then go around each table sharing their answer before discussing with the entire class. To any teacher who's asked a question only to be met with blank stares, this might be one way to encourage participation. The question of how much should one copy has been relatively less explored. Should you copy entire solutions from your peers or only part of a solution? Through our research, we found that most successful strategies have one major thing in common. They maintain the diversity of the population's solutions. Everyone's exploring different ideas, increasing the chance of the group discovering the one best solution. We hypothesized that partial copying could be another way to maintain diversity, if not actively create it. We sought out to answer these questions. Is it better to copy partially or fully? Is this result impacted by the collaboration network structure? And how much should you copy from others? To answer these questions, we created a computational model of social learning. The problem that the agents are trying to solve in our simulation are tunably rugged environments via the NK landscapes. NK landscapes have two parameters, N, which is the dimensionality of the problem, and K, which is the number of epistatic interactions between the solution elements, which determines the difficulty of the problem. So here, solutions are bit strings. So N is the length of the bit string, and K are the number of interactions between those bits. So here's an example. In this easy K equals 0 landscape, we have N equals 3, and you can see from this table of payoffs that each bit on its own determines a payoff or a contribution to the final payoff. In this harder K equals 1 landscape, you can see that now pairs of bits determine a payoff for the final score. So you can see that the search space is much larger and much harder to search. To model social and individual learning, we had 100 individuals start with initially random solutions and associated scores. At each time step, each individual chooses a random neighbor and observes their score. If the neighbor score is better, then the individual copies from that neighbor solution, either fully or partially. And when they copy partially, we have each bit copied with 50% probability. If the neighbor's score is worse, then the individual attempts to learn on their own by flipping one random bit in their solution. If this improves the score, they keep the improved solution, engaging in individual learning, and if it doesn't improve their score, then they just discard the change and don't learn that learning trial. Finally, to model the collaboration network, we had each individual specifically assigned neighbors. We poured on the two extremes that I explained earlier: global groups, where everyone is connected to everyone else, and local groups, where individuals only have access to their immediate neighbors. these two types of networks have a different efficiency of information spread. In global groups, information spreads very quickly, but in local groups, information spreads slowly, and using local networks has been identified as one way to maintain the diversity of solutions in the population. To measure performance, we examine the average score across the individuals in the group at the end of the learning trials. This captures the performance for the group as a whole. Finally, here's some results. First, we wanted to answer whether individuals should copy entire solutions or partial solutions. We analyzed the group performance. As I explained before, this is the average final score. We analyzed this for 4 conditions across 2 dimensions: amount of copying, full or partial, and the connectivity of the group, global or local. We examined these 4 conditions across all possible problem difficulties, so K equals 0 through 15. To start to investigate whether partial copying is better than full copying, we can look at this graph of group performance over time. And notice we have the x-axis log scaled because most of the learning happens in the initial transient. So this represents one problem difficulty, K equals 6. You can see that both full copying groups get stuck on local optima early on in the simulation, and then they just stick there because everyone in the population has that same solution and no one can improve it. However, the partial copying groups learn slower and eventually come to better solutions. This graph also shows that. Here we have the final group performance for each possible problem difficulty. So we can see that for K equals 0, all of the groups succeed, but as the problem difficulty increases, partial copying outperforms full copying by a bigger and bigger margin. We also see that for partial copying, the local groups did better for intermediate problem spaces, while the global groups did better for the hardest, most random spaces. And then lastly, we can see that the local groups for full copying, the local groups do better than the global groups across the board. To start to explain why we see these results, we looked at the learning choice dynamics. Here we have the proportion of the population that are engaging in each type of learning. So the top graph shows how many are copying, and the bottom graph shows how many are learning at each time step. So first we see that for full copying, both types of learning disappear quickly, signaling a loss of diversity in solutions. For partial copying, both types of learning are maintained much longer into the simulation. So we also observe that there is an advantage of global groups when copying is partial. So to start, we look at these local groups, these local partial copying groups. We see that solutions start to conform, which decreases copying opportunities, and that explains why copying peaks before the 10th time step here and then decreases. However, the global groups could copy from anyone, which increases their odds of choosing a better neighbor to copy from, so they were able to keep copying much later into the simulation. And this since the global groups could potentially discover new regions in the problem space by partially copying a distant neighbor, they had more opportunities for local improvements. So we see that the copying in the top graph corresponds to this spike in individual learning in the bottom graph. They go together for the global partial groups. To understand this in a different way, we frame it as an explore-exploit problem. Individual learning corresponds to local exploration, and copying entire solutions corresponds to exploitation. However, partial copying is a hybrid method. You're exploiting the solution elements being copied, but exploring a broader set of potential solutions. We found that partial global maintain the greatest diversity of solutions. Here's an example of global partial copying. This artist is inspired by interesting images and combines them into a work of digital art. If you look for where the images on the right appear in the final piece, you see that they are pretty close duplications. She's exploiting these solution elements, but she doesn't copy them perfectly. She changes their size, the lighting, and how they fit with other solution elements. The resulting piece is greater than just a combination of the images. She brings her own ideas to the work, exploring a broader set of potential solutions, and the result is incredible. Lastly, we wanted to answer, how much should you copy from others? We've shown that copying 50% of a neighbor's solution outperforms full copying, but how much copying imparts the greatest benefit? We see that for global copying, copying a single bit gives you the best benefit. It mixes solutions without destruction of good combinations of bits. But for local copying, you can copy a few more bits. Nearby solutions are more alike, so there's not as much disruption as in the global condition. To sum up our findings, we found that partial copying benefits the group even though it comes at a risk to the individual. When you copy entirely from someone that you know has a better solution than your own, you are guaranteed an improvement in your score. But when you partially copy, you don't have that guarantee, and you risk creating a worse scoring solution. But if you're part of a team, your own success matters less than the success of the group. We also found that there is a sweet spot for copying. Some copying benefits the group, but too much copying is detrimental. Yet another reason why cheating in school is harmful. Lastly, we found that global partial copying performs the best of the strategies that we looked at. When you partially copy from someone who has a good but potentially very different solution from you, you create a mix of two good solutions that could result in an even better solution. It could also be a worse solution, but sometimes finding bad solutions can be useful as you can narrow down the elements of a good solution. When you're in a group approaching a problem, it can be hard to speak up unless you're very sure that your idea is good. As a result, groups might tend to only explore a few different possible solutions to the problem and converge on a suboptimal decision. If you want to make the best decision, though, you need to consider all of the options. Explore some ideas on your own, then collaborate with others and listen to their input. Consider how your solutions might work together. Share ideas that aren't fully thought out. Someone else might have the missing piece to make your solution complete and extraordinary. More specifically, for teachers, give your students the chance to explore ideas on their own before putting them in groups. When doing group work, consider having full class discussions so students benefit from a greater diversity of ideas. For students, seek out people who have very different perspectives from you, and don't completely abandon your idea when someone else's seems better. See if there's a way to combine elements of both of your ideas to produce something even better. I hope this research has given you things to think about when it comes to how you teach and learn. Thank you so much for being here today, and if you have any questions, feel free to enter them into the live chat. Thanks again.